Good evening and welcome to Resource PNG. On tonight's show, we feature interviews with an oil exploration company and we talk to the Department of Treasury on a number of issues. But first, we join Michaeline Moyabasi in this interview with Jenny Lean from Heritage Oil. We talk about oil discoveries and the associated logistics that make exploration successful. Heritage Oil's current PPLs that are located in close proximity to existing markets, and we hear about prospects in Western and Gulf Province. Other than their work in the resource sector, Jenny Lean tells us how Heritage Oil has assisted in medical health, education and sports programs.
Thank you, Ms. Lean, for your participation on Resource PNG today with Heritage New Guinea. The first question, how significant is it that you find potential discoveries near oil search and Exxon projects? What kind of possibilities lay ahead for Heritage Oil?
Right, well, it's always good to make a discovery near infrastructure because, as you know, in Papua New Guinea, logistics are one of the main costs in doing any project. And so if there is already infrastructure for delivering your product to market, such as oil or gas, then you have an existing early delivery for your return on your investment. So, for example, in PPL 319, where we are drilling Tuiwapi, when we're organised for that. If it was oil, then we'd be talking to Oil Search about sending the oil up to the separator plant, or gas at Gobi, to send back down their line, their Kumul line to the Kumul terminal. So that would be, a first prize would be finding oil. With gas, with the Exxon LNG train, that would also be a possibility. We would be in discussions with those people. So it's always good. If you don't have an oil line or a gas line, then you have to build all that infrastructure, and that's a huge development cost.
Can you elaborate on how some of your licenses could be utilised by local industry and domestic markets, particularly the Ramu anticline?
Yes, in PPL 337, that is an area that's very close to several markets. There's mines, and there is also the Madang township, and as well as that there's the industrial park, which is planned to be developed on the north coast of Madang, and these will be canning plants and industry manufacturing, which are very high users of energy. And so if we find gas there in the Bantam anticline, the power station will be utilised by the mines for their work, for the local people to give them access to clean power, which will be less expensive than diesel, and then of course with the industries that will enable that development to proceed.
PRL 437 seems to be in a region of high importance in Western Province. Could you describe the prospects?
Yes, well, PPL 437 is close to the gas trends up there, and there's high condensate levels as well in Stanley, Elevala, Ketu and Tingu. So there will be a development which Horizon's leading the charge on in that area of the Western Province. So this is a young development, but it's underway, and so this is a new frontier for exploration and development in Papua New Guinea. So that's why 437 is in a good location.
Plans are underway for the prospect PPL 319 in 2014. Can you describe the Tuiwapi structure?
Sure. PPL 319 is in the Gulf Province, and its western boundary is the Kikori River, and on the east it's bounded by the elk antelope interoil type structures. So the western side of the licence is more geologically similar to the oil fields, the Oil Search oil fields and the Exxon gas fields running down that side, which is like Toro sandstones. But the eastern side is more the reef type limestone structures such as elk antelope. So Tuiwapi is in that more simple and understood type Toro sandstone structure, and we're hoping that we'll find oil in that Toro group, and there may be gas cap, or we're not sure until we drill it, but it's in a very good location on trend with the other discoveries, and as you said before, it's quite close to the oil and gas lines and the infrastructure for that neck of the woods. So Tuiwapi is a very important well for heritage in that respect. And in that licence we also have some other big structures, the Melody structure to the east, which would be more like the limestone type structure and discovery, similar to elk antelope, which I guess would be a separate development.
One of Heritage New Guinea's CSR policy has been sustainable capacity building. Could you just talk about Dr. Elsie Kanau?
Yes, I've been working in Papua New Guinea for about 20 years, and we always do medical, health and education programs. But I was thinking that in the Gulf, what would be good to do would be to take a graduate from the dental school here in Port Moresby and mentor that person to working as a dentist, while Heritage is supporting all of that financially and purchasing the equipment and setting that up. We would like that person to be then mentored in business practice so that she can run her own practice. And hopefully then Dr. Gahana, who's very resourceful, although very, very young, will be able to set off on her own and set up a practice either in Papua New Guinea, or perhaps she'll be able to, if she wants to emigrate and work in another country for a while, she'll be fully trained. She's fully trained as a dentist, but she'll be fully trained in business practice, in running a dental practice. So to me, that means that there's a person who can run a business, has a skill, can support a family. So we let that person go and we take another graduate and we start again and do a similar project. So that to me is a sustainable development, because if once we go, we've still left behind these people who know how to do these things.
Exactly. You've also got the sports program.
Yes.
Yeah. In wrapping up, would you like to talk about the Palais?
Yes. Well, this is great fun. The Palais, the women's rugby sevens, have a possibility of being able to compete in the Rio Games in 2016, and so we're supporting the Palais as major sponsors along with CPL, and so we feel that promoting this women's sevens rugby, which is very exciting and great fun to watch and good fun, is something that we can do, and it's something we enjoy to have on our social responsibility books.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lean, for your participation here on Resource PNG.
Thank you.
That was Ms. Jenny Lean from Heritage New Guinea here on Resource PNG.
Acting Secretary for the Department of Treasury, coming up next. Welcome back. In this interview with the Acting Secretary for the Department of Treasury, Mr. Dari Vele talks about how the PNG LNG project will be a game changer for the national revenue for the next 50 to 60 years. As a young resource nation, Mr. Vele speaks of 5 elements which he thinks are necessary to be recognized as a country coming of age. He also talks about how the consolidation of mining and petroleum assets will maximize opportunities and how this will tie in well with the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
I have with me Dari Vele, the Secretary of Treasury Department. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dari, you recently described PNG as a maturing resource nation. Could you please explain that for our viewers' benefit?
Sure. What I was getting at is the idea that we found a lot of resource now, and I think the LNG project is a game changer in terms of the amount of revenues that we'll be receiving over the next 50, 60 years. And then therefore we need to have institutions developed and established which allow us to better manage some of those revenues that are coming forward. So in terms of the maturing as a young resource nation, I think in the speech I gave, I talked about 5 elements which I think are necessary for us to be recognized as a responsible country, as a country that's coming of age with obviously LNG and other things over the horizon.
Do you think maturing might be a little aspirational, as we've only been in the game a short time?
Well, I think it's not such a bad thing to think big but start small and try and grow as fast as you can. So if I could, Anya, I might just explain in terms of those 5 or 6 elements I was talking about. But the first thing for me is to consolidate your, separately. And again, I think I said earlier on today it's an oxymoron, but we need to consolidate our petroleum assets on one side and our mineral assets on the other side. That allows us to pursue the maximization of the opportunities in that in those respective areas. Separate balance sheets, separate decision-making process, separate skill sets. Again, that's the way companies should be run. If we try to do that, for us, we're a blessed country, and therefore we'll be able to generate significant revenues. So the next step in my continuum is to have a sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund is able to manage, very efficiently, very prudently, but most importantly, very responsibly those revenues that are generated from our petroleum and our mineral resources, and others as they reach a certain level. The idea is that the money or the revenues go into the sovereign wealth fund, and then we redistribute them to the country and to other areas into investments through our annual budgeting process. So the people, through their elected leaders, still have the final say on how we're spending our money. I think there's a lot of confusion around where government is with the sovereign wealth fund, and essentially where we're at is we're discussing whether we should have a savings account, if you like, a separate savings account. There are different models for sovereign wealth funds in the world, and our model is one in which we're trying to build our nation. What's the point of having all these resources if we're not allowed to access it and build our nation, which has been the experience of some of the other countries that are maturing at the same time we are. And so what we need to do is, so we are trying to build our country. Theoretically, the argument is you can give people in the future a pool of cash, or you can spend the cash now and develop roads, schools, hospitals, and bridges, and in 50 years' time, you have an educated, a very healthy class of Papua New Guinean that is exposed to the world because they've got very solid infrastructure. Our ability to build our country very fast is kind of limited right now, and therefore we need to focus on trying to build capacity in our country. Therefore, there's always going to be some cash that we just can't spend. I think we explained to Cabinet that you got one bel tasol. If you try and stuff your stomach too much, you get sick, and that's like the economy. If you overheat the economy, then things start to break down. So what government is looking at is just having a separate account, which we didn't have before, which is primarily for savings. And hopefully over time, we can give our future generation of Papua New Guineans infrastructure, health and education, but also some money as well, and then hopefully we've skilled them up to spend that money efficiently in the future. I think the third point in my continuum then is is joining transparency initiatives such as the extractive industries transparency initiative. Publish what you pay, so that we're better able to track the money flows from the resource sector into government, and then from government, where is it going? And I think the push now under the O'Neill Dion government and under the Treasury administration of Honourable Don Pollier is to get the money out to the provinces, is to get the money out to the districts, is to get the money out to the local level governments. If we're able to track the efficiency of how we're doing that, then that allows us to plan better. So we can make sure that the tax system is right, we can make sure that the administrative structure is right, and also the technical elements of oil and gas and also mining is appropriate. The last part of that appropriate support then, in terms of my view of where Papua New Guinea needs to get to, is your independent commission against corruption. And again, I say that the government should be commended for what it did last Tuesday, not only in passing a record 15 billion kina budget, but it also established the legislation around the Independent Commission Against Corruption. And now we're all looking forward to, I think, an environment where people who do the wrong thing, and I'm not talking about people or companies that do the wrong thing because we're naive, because we're a bit young and we didn't know any better, but there are those elements out there that seek to actively you know, breach our rules and our laws, and having an independent you know, commission against corruption, we'll be able to prosecute those that do that. So I think all of these elements are what you know, what we call mature countries have, and we're putting in the foundation now, which is very pleasing.
Resource PNG continues after the break. You're watching Resource PNG. Continuing our interview with the Acting Secretary of the Department of Treasury, Dari Vele, we find out how the government intends to achieve a saving mechanism, such as the Sovereign Wealth Fund, through investing in capacity building.
Is it your opinion that we do have the structures in place, or management structures rather, for something like a Sovereign Wealth Fund?
I think the more operative question is, how do we intend to get there? You know, and unfortunately, life isn't one of those things where you can throw the towel in, or you can pick up your bat and ball and go home. Yeah. So we have to aspire to getting there. And I think what you know, the government under the O'Neill Dion government is trying to do is to invest in that capacity building. I think as Papua New Guineans, what we have to accept is that we can't do everything, and therefore there'll always be an element of bringing people from outside. I don't think that's such a bad thing. You know, I think if our Papua New Guinean men and women are sitting next to, you know, foreign elements to deliver a particular outcome, you know, those Papua New Guinean you know, men and women also upskilling themselves, and they get to learn. I mean, we're moving into uncharted territory, and whilst we've got some success stories in terms of international exposure and international capacity, and you know, I think about Asa Kelly Tareka, who's come back to the country, and Nigeria Alpi, and the likes of the late Tony Siagaru and so on. That pool is quite small. So I think what we need to do is find that right mix between bringing foreign elements to assist us develop those structures that we require, but learning from them as much as possible. And so I would like to think that we don't have them now, but we'll get there. And I think in maybe, you know, 10 years' time, there's no reason why you know, 93, 94, 95% of these organizations aren't staffed fully by Papua New Guineans. Right.
Has there been a successful model in the developing world of a sovereign wealth fund or something like it?
That's a tricky question, and essentially because each country has different aspirations. You know, for Papua New Guinea, I think the elements must be that you know, and I think this is something that is coming through very much in terms of the O'Neill Dion government, and of course my own Treasury administration led by Honourable Don Pollier, is that you have to build a nation. We're all a part of something bigger. Yes. And when you talk about extractive resources, you know, one argument could be that you know, the landowners are there and therefore they should get everything. But that's not nation building. And when you talk about the different models out there, you know, Norway, which is probably the largest and the most efficiently run of the sovereign wealth funds, gives everything to government. Government then is responsible to look after all its people, and they have a wonderful you know, sense of life and quality of life. Then you look at some of the smaller countries, you know, like Timor-Leste, for example, who has got significant amounts of money, but they can't access it, and that's been one of the issues. So I think for us, our main goals are, one, to build a nation, but two, also build our country. This idea that we have a lot of money sitting somewhere, but we can't access it to build our country, doesn't sit well with a lot of Papua New Guineans, and it shouldn't do. So I think us addressing our nation building, addressing the idea that we need to build our country, but we recognize that we've got capacity constraints, and the reality is, if you you spend all this money in one point in time, I think the economy will have some issues, and there'll be nothing left to show for it. Because there's also some examples where there's failed sovereign wealth funds. You know, Nauru is you know, is an example where they had a lot of money, but you know, it's all gone now, and even the Nauru building in Melbourne is no longer owned by the Nauru Wealth Fund. So I think you know, we've come at a time when there are some important lessons to be learned globally, and I'm quite glad that, you know, the government is adhering to some of the lessons that we've heard and trying to implement and instigate international best practice standards.
Now, you also recently referred to the Kumul consolidation agenda. Could you explain that?
Sure. The Kumul consolidation agenda is the idea that we sort of bring all of our participation and our interests in mining under one roof, and then we do that similarly with our petroleum assets. I've always thought that sort of Petromin was a little bit ambitious in terms of trying to bring together your petroleum assets and your mineral assets under one house. The danger there is that they're two different sectors, and it's very difficult to concentrate on exactly what it is you're trying to achieve if you're worried about what mining is doing and mining guys are worried about petroleum is doing, and that doesn't give them the best opportunity to maximize the returns that are available in the particular industry. So government is now looking at this idea of the Kumul companies, Kumul Mining, which has Oktedi, for example, and Tolokuma, and wherever we own our mining interest, they come under there. In the Kumul Petroleum Company, and I think the precursor is the National Petroleum Company of Papua New Guinea, but you have PNG, LNG, and should other gas projects and other petroleum projects, other petrochemical projects get up, which is usually the case when you have one project, other projects come. Then you can all put them under one roof, and so the decisions that the company and that the government starts to make relating to petroleum only have to do with petroleum. We don't say, well, let's not do this one now because we've got a mining project coming in a year's time. That's bad for business. So where is that now? I think they've got some headline legislation through, and now we need to go through the process of getting the organic law changed and some of the subordinate legislation and I'll show you the manuals for these things are they're quite large. So again, getting those people in to start building up those standing operating, identifying those people, and as I said earlier, that right mix of Papua New Guinea and foreign elements to make sure that we get the best outcome, because I think that's what the people of Papua New Guinea deserve.
More with Diary Vele when we return. Thanks for staying with us. In this segment, we discuss an overview of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI.
Now, Diary, with reference to talking about managing our resource wealth and all that goes with it, can you give our viewers an overview of the EITI?
Sure. The EITI is a global push to, in effect, bring in transparency into the flow of monies in the extractive industries. So companies pay royalties, dividends, and development levies and taxes and so on into government. Government then spends that, onshore through the provinces and the districts and the local level governments and so on, all over the world. So this isn't something just for Papua New Guinea. The international experience is that some of the younger countries that don't have the institutions to properly manage the wealth that they receive, they've squandered it. And in some of the worst cases, civil wars have erupted over these things. So I think in the in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there's a global push to make all of this flows transparent. People get to see exactly how much money is being paid to the government. People get to see how much money it's receiving, because again, it's one thing to say we paid this much and another thing to say we received this much, and make sure that they match. Then what government does with it, and not only government as an institution, but government as people. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister have made no bones about the fact that they are subject to scrutiny as well. My Treasurer makes the point that he is subject to scrutiny as well. I, as a departmental head, should be subject to scrutiny as well. So I think bringing that extra layer of transparency is quite important. I think I explained earlier, one is from a productivity and efficiency perspective. If we can see where money is going and how we're spending it, are we spending it in the right areas? And is the things that we're wanting to do and the initiatives that we're taking, are they bearing fruit? Again, the Ol Karam Kai Kai Nogat principle. And so we can start to manage our own internal process there. the other side of that coin, obviously, is to be able to point out, these organizations, these elements within every economy that are there to break the rules and try to unduly enrich themselves. And I'm a big believer in naming and shaming. And I think, so that's what the EITI is. So it brings together government, it brings together the industry, and it brings together civil society, and says, sunshine is the best disinfectant. Here it is, everyone. And exactly. So let's all have a look at it, and let's comment on it. And between the government and between the industries and between the rest of civil society, everyone has an input into how we can make things better for everybody. And so I think that's quite important. And Nanya, I can't bring it back and I can't underestimate the importance of our ICAC again. Because it's one thing to be able to name and identify where things are wrong, but we must be able to prosecute.
Yes.
And so I think, again, in terms of my little continuum, we're moving in the right track.
Excellent.
Resource PNG continues this interview after the break. You're watching Resource PNG. Continuing our interview with Diary Vele, we discuss how the EITI will be addressed through the flow of information from the subnational to grassroots levels.
Diary, I would imagine one of the biggest problems is information flow from subnational level or at grassroots level. How will you counter this, specifically with EITI and it being free flow of information?
Sure, and it's a big issue. I think the first step is to identify that it's an issue. I think all too often we don't identify it enough. We get so comfortable with the fact that that some things don't work in our building, and we take the stairs because the lift doesn't work. I think under the O'Neill-Dion government, certainly under the budget that the Treasurer has just handed down, what we are trying to do is to put in some measures, and I'll talk about some specifics in a little bit, to be able to track. Let's talk about sort of at the national level firstly. At the national level, we need to bring in a performance-based sort of system, where those that perform against their key outcomes and their performance indicators, they get rewarded. Mm-hmm. Those that don't, well, you get resources taken away from you, and someone gives you a call and says, maybe you should reconsider not being in this job. So as a budget cycle, we'll be putting in these 6 monthly mid-year reviews, if you like. So everyone, you start to incentivize people to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. A big part of that is being able to track in information, and we are an information age. So government, through the, bringing in things like the electronic ID system, bringing in the integrated government information system. There's a lot of words here, but these things allow us to better track where things are going. I think in respect of the EITI, the great thing is that we've got some of the world's largest companies operating, they're a part of the stakeholder groups. Right. So in terms of, the PNG, LNG, we would expect that Exxon and Oil Search and Santos and Merlin Petroleum and our own National Petroleum Company, they invest in systems and structures which allow the government to help its people as well. I've just come back from Tabubil in Octedi, and again they're investing in a lot of money and that in their ICT systems and in their management systems, which will be shared with the provincial government and the government. So through our partners working collaboratively and working together, we'll be able to better track, I believe. The question is, as always, when we know things are going wrong, what do we do? Because I think Papua New Guinea, sometimes we're not the best people at punishing ourselves, and so as a part of this process, I would like to think that we use our partners to identify where things are going wrong and where things are going right. This is not always it's not only a witch hunt, but we identify those provinces, those districts, and those LLGs which are performing and we reward them further, even if we're taking away that those aren't. And I think that that system of risk and reward is the way that we will manage some of the information flow. And like I said, to the extent that the technology is required, then we would expect our partners to assist us.
Will that be managed at department level?
I think where the government is going is to decentralise. So we need to empower our districts and empower our provinces. I believe that when you do a change, that you're always going to have a lot of pain for the first 5 or 6 years. So we make no bones about the fact, and we don't deny the fact that for the next 5 or 6 years, there's going to be a lot of pain, and then we'll get a lot of things wrong. But they're our mistakes, and they're mistakes that we are using to leap even further after those years of pain, which is where I think the reality is. So I would like to think that some of these things will get better sooner rather than later, but the reality is they probably won't. But I can assure you that if we do things right and learn from the lessons of our implementation phase and our transition phase, and then we'll be better able to slingshot growth through the rest of the country more efficiently.
We'll have more from Darivele when we return. Thanks for your company on Resource PNG. In this last segment of our interview with Darivele, he clarifies equity arrangements in the PNG LNG project.
Just the last question, Dari.
Sure.
There seems to be some confusion over the equity arrangements for landowners in the LNG project. Can you clarify that?
Sure, and let me clarify the issue, and then I'll clarify and explain exactly what it is we are trying to message. And again, I apologise because you know how these things are. The budget gets done, and it's one of those measures that was brought in quite late. So I think the way that we've messaged it throughout the budget books has been a bit weak, and I think it's led to a lot of confusion and conjecture. And I can imagine that a lot of people are questioning the Prime Minister, and I know my treasurer. I've got many missed calls from our good landowners. Let me qualify by saying, as I always do, that I'm from Porabara. So I'm a plant site landowner.
Is that an excuse?
I'm a plant site landowner. And again, my career has been built over the last 6 or 7 years, dealing exclusively with the PNG LNG landowners, being the face of the landowners and the national government. Up and down the PNG LNG project footprint. So I'm across a lot of these issues, and I hope that by me trying to explain some of this stuff, that it calms a lot of landowners down. Everyone knows God forbid my own family should disown me. What we did in 2009 in Kokopo was to give the landowners an option, a call option for more equity in the PNG LNG project. So what that effectively means is that they have the right to purchase extra equity in the future. See, our laws are set up so that landowners don't risk money. So it's much safer for landowners to come in later when the plant is built and it's running and we know the issues around it. You don't want to put landowner money in early or government money in early and you go through all the risk. It doesn't work and you've lost money. So that was the thinking behind the call option. So in effect, in 2016, when the project has been running for a couple of years, between 1 January and 30 June 2016, they have the right to purchase an extra packet of shares in PNG LNG project. But we agreed to that price in 2009. So again, we gave them the 2009 price. And if you look at it in 2016 terms, it's much, much more valuable.
Should have changed.
But that's not again, that's not a savings for the landowner or a saving for government. It's the right thing to do. And as I've always said, sometimes if it sort of makes sense in here, then the numbers should add up eventually. So what we did was say, this is the price now, you get to pay it in 2016. Now the intention of government was always that we would finance. We would help them get that money, but it's about $1 billion US. So we have $1 billion US coming to us in 2016, and we're going to give the landowners an extra packet of shares in the PNG LNG project. All we've done now is we're using 600 million kina. We're financing 600 million kina of the $1 billion that we're going to receive in 2016. Right. So when we receive our $1 billion, we'll obviously give 600 million kina back to it. And that 600 million kina goes towards building roads and schools and hospitals and bridges. Because while we've got sunshine over the horizon with PNG LNG, we've got people that need help now. That's right. And so that's all we've done. So please, can I tell my landowners and all our friends and government, we're not selling the equity to anybody. Samtinya Mblo landowners, no, all by Kisim in 2016. So I hope by me saying that calms a lot of the confusion and conjecture going around town right now.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're very welcome.
Diary, there seems to be lots of hope with all your responses. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to your viewers, obviously.
Diary Vele, the Secretary of Treasury Department.
That ends Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Or you can check our page on Facebook. Until the same time next week, bye for now.